Real people, real confessions, the stories you weren't supposed to hear. Welcome to Beyond Reddit Stories. I've been keeping a secret for 3 years. A secret so carefully hidden that not even my own brother, the person who once knew me better than anyone, has a clue. For the past 36 months, I have been paying his rent. Every month, quietly, without his knowledge, without a single thank you, because, well, he doesn't even know there's something to thank me for. And no, this wasn't some kind of selfless act of sainthood. I didn't wake up one day thinking, I'm going to be the best sibling in the world and save the day. It started for a reason, a very personal, very complicated reason that I've carried around like a stone in my chest. You see, my brother has always been the strong one. When we were kids, he was the shield that stood between me and every bad thing the world tried to throw at me. He was the one who skipped school to pick me up when I forgot my house key. The one who sat with me outside the principal's office so I wouldn't cry alone. The one who gave me his coat when it was freezing, even though it meant he'd walk home shivering. But life, it has a way of turning the tables. Somewhere along the way, the strong one became the one who needed saving. 3 years ago, he was on the verge of losing everything: his home, his stability, the little dignity he had left after a series of brutal setbacks. And I couldn't watch that happen. Not after everything he'd done for me. Not after one night in particular that I'll never forget, the night that made me swear I would never let him hit rock bottom, even if it meant sacrificing pieces of my own life to keep him afloat. So I made a choice. I called his landlord, I arranged the payments, I made them promise never to tell him where the money came from. And just like that, I stepped into a role I never thought I'd play: the invisible safety net. At first, it felt noble, like I was finally repaying a debt I could never fully settle. But over time, that feeling changed. It became heavier, more complicated. There were days when I felt proud, and days when I felt resentful. Days when I questioned if I was actually helping him or just keeping him from facing reality. And the craziest part, I don't even know what will happen if he finds out. I've played that scene in my head 100 times, him looking at me with betrayal in his eyes. Or maybe gratitude. Or maybe something in between. But this story isn't just about paying someone's rent. It's about why I did it, and what happened the day he finally found out. If you met me in real life, you probably wouldn't think much of me. I'm the kind of person you pass in the grocery store and forget 2 seconds later. Mid-30s, average height, work in an office that does something with data. Even I can't make my job sound interesting. I live in a small apartment on the quieter side of the city, where the loudest noise you'll hear is the neighbor's dog barking at the mailman. I keep to myself. Always have. I'm not the type to dominate a conversation or tell wild stories at parties. In fact, I rarely go to parties. My social circle is small, deliberately small, because I've learned that with fewer people in your life, there are fewer opportunities for things to fall apart. My brother, though, he's the opposite, or at least, he used to be. Growing up, he was this bright, magnetic force, the kind of kid who could make friends in a room full of strangers before the clock hit noon. Tall, athletic, confident in ways I could never be. And for a while, it felt like he was untouchable. People liked him, teachers liked him, life seemed to like him. We didn't have the easiest childhood. Our parents weren't cruel, but they weren't exactly present either. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Dad was more like a guest star in our lives, showing up occasionally, but never sticking around long enough for the credits to roll. That meant a lot of the time. It was just me and my brother. And he took that role seriously. He wasn't just my sibling, he was my anchor. When I got sick in 3rd grade and missed a week of school, he did my homework for me so I wouldn't fall behind. When I was 13 and came home crying because some kids made fun of my thrift store sneakers, he somehow scraped together enough money from odd jobs to buy me a pair of the brand name ones everyone wore. But that protectiveness came at a cost to him. He dropped out of college after just 1 semester because Mom got sick. And somebody had to cover the bills. That somebody was him. He worked nights at a warehouse, hauling boxes until his back ached, just so I could stay in school and not have to work part-time. At the time, I didn't fully understand the weight of what he was doing for me. Now, looking back, I see how much of his own future he quietly set aside to make sure mine stayed intact. Fast forward to a few years ago, things had changed. The brother I remembered as unshakable was different. The easy charm was still there in glimpses, but it was buried under exhaustion. He'd been through a bad breakup, lost a job he loved, tried to start over twice, only to hit dead ends. The last I heard, he was renting a small one-bedroom in a not-so-great part of town, working temp jobs that barely covered the basics. We didn't talk every day, but when we did, I could hear the struggle in his voice. He never said it outright, pride runs deep in our family, but I could tell he was barely holding on. And then, one afternoon, over coffee at a dingy diner, he let something slip. "They might kick me out next month," he muttered, staring into his cup. "Rent's overdue again." He laughed after he said it, like it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke. I knew it. And that's when I felt that old familiar pull, the one I'd felt when we were kids, and he'd step between me and trouble. Only this time, I was the one who could step in. I just had no idea how much that choice was going to change both of our lives. The day after that conversation in the diner, I made the call. It wasn't even a decision, really more like muscle memory. My brother had always been the one who took action when I couldn't. Now it was my turn. I found the number for his landlord. My voice was calm, steady, like I was discussing something as ordinary as scheduling a plumber. "I'd like to take care of the rent balance for apartment 2B, I said, "and I'd like it to remain anonymous." There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear the curiosity buzzing through the phone. But the landlord didn't press. He just confirmed the amount and took my payment. "We'll consider it settled," he said. That was month 1. By month 2, my brother mentioned casually over the phone that the landlord must have messed something up because the late fees disappeared. He sounded almost relieved, but also suspicious. I played dumb. Weird. Maybe they're trying to keep tenants happy. By month 3, I realized this wasn't going to be a one-time thing. He was still struggling, still juggling temp jobs, still coming up short, and something in me just couldn't let him fall, so I kept paying. At first, it felt manageable. I had a decent salary, no kids, a modest lifestyle. Cutting out a few luxuries here and there didn't seem like a big deal. No more weekend getaways, fewer dinners out. I told friends I was saving for something big when they asked why I was always skipping plans. But the truth is, something big was keeping someone else's roof over their head. The months started to stack up. Rent day became the secret ritual: open my laptop, log into my bank account, transfer the money, close the screen before I could think too hard about it. Then the sacrifices started to get heavier. I skipped a trip I'd been planning for years. I turned down a chance to take a professional course that could have boosted my career because the tuition was almost exactly 1 month's rent for him. I even broke things off with someone I'd been seeing, partly because I didn't want to explain why I was always broke despite having a decent job. And the stress, it wasn't just financial. Every time we talked, I was on edge, terrified I'd slip and say something that would reveal the truth. I learned to bite my tongue, to nod along when he complained about money, to feign surprise when he said he was barely scraping by. The worst part was when he started making plans to fix his situation, plans that I knew were doomed. He'd talk about moving to a cheaper place across town, not realizing the rent there would still be more than he could afford without my help. He even mentioned crashing on a friend's couch until things get better, and my stomach twisted at the thought of all those months of quiet sacrifice going to waste. Still, I stayed silent, because deep down, I was afraid that if I told him, he'd reject the help out of pride. And then what? I'd have to watch him lose everything, knowing I could have stopped it. But keeping the secret came with its own risks. About a year in, there was a close call. His landlord called me by mistake when there was a plumbing issue in the building, and for one heart-stopping second, I thought they'd say my name in front of him. My brother was in the room when I took the call, so I had to pretend it was a telemarketer and hang up mid-sentence. By the second year, I'd become an expert at compartmentalizing. My public life was one thing, my secret life was another, but no matter how carefully I managed it, the walls were starting to crack. Then came the moment that nearly brought it all crashing down. One rainy evening, I stopped by his place unannounced, bringing some leftover soup I'd made. He was in the middle of going through his mail. I noticed an envelope from the landlord in his hand, and the look on his face was strange. Not relieved, not angry, something else. He looked up at me and said, "You know anything about this?" And my heart slammed against my ribs, because in that instant, I knew the clock on my secret was running out. He was holding the envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. It was a printed statement, neat, black and white numbers, a simple line that read current balance $0. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? I asked, feigning ignorance. But my voice cracked just enough to betray me. He studied me for a long moment, his brow furrowing. It's weird, he said slowly. I was behind on rent for months. Then out of nowhere, it's been paid, every month, on time, for a while now. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe the landlord's just bad at math. He didn't smile. No, I called. Someone's been paying it for me. They wouldn't say who. He paused. But I think I know. My pulse roared in my ears. Why would you think that? Because you're the only person stubborn enough to do something like this, he said. And the only one who'd think I wouldn't find out. The air between us felt sharp. I wanted to deny it to keep the lie intact, but suddenly I was so tired. Tired of sneaking, tired of half-truths, tired of living with the weight of something that had started as love, but morphed into a shadow over both our lives. So I told him. The words spilled out before I could stop them. Yes, it was me. Yes. It had been 3 years. Yes. I made the landlord swear to keep my name out of it. And yes, it started because I was scared of watching him lose his home, scared of seeing him fall any further. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not yet. I took a breath. Do you remember the night Mom died? His expression shifted a flicker of grief, confusion, something unreadable. She called me into her hospital room. I continued. You were downstairs talking to the nurse. She took my hand and said, "Promise me you'll take care of your brother. He's given up more than you know." My throat tightened. I said yes. I didn't even think about what that meant. I just said yes. He stared at me. That was 3 years ago. I nodded. That night, I also found out something I never told you. Mom told me she asked you to leave school when she got sick. But what I didn't know was why you agreed so fast. She said you'd been offered a job out of state, a good one, with a real future, but you turned it down because you didn't want me to have to work and drop out of high school. His eyes widened. That's why I did it, I said quietly. I owed you. You gave up your chance so I could have mine. Paying your rent. It was the only way I knew how to even the score. For a long moment, he said nothing, just sat there, staring at the floor, and then his voice cracked, not with anger, but something far more raw. I didn't want a score to even, he said. I wanted you to live your life, not chain it to mine. That hit me harder than I expected, because he was right in trying to repay him. I had made my life smaller. I'd built this secret around us like a wall, thinking it was protection, but it was also a prison. The next few minutes were a blur, raised voices, sharp words, long silences. At one point, he said he felt humiliated, like I'd been feeding a stray dog behind his back. I snapped that I'd rather humiliate him than watch him sleep in his car. It wasn't a neat resolution. It wasn't a hug and cry moment, but somewhere in that mess, the truth finally sat between us, ugly, complicated, but real. And for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. I didn't just survive that night, I changed because of it. Something inside me cracked open in a way I didn't expect. I'd always thought of myself as the type who waits for a rescue, who hides until the noise dies down, but I wasn't that person anymore. I had faced something raw and dangerous, and instead of breaking, I held my ground. For weeks afterward, I noticed small changes. My voice was steadier when I spoke. I didn't flinch as easily. I stopped second-guessing every move. Fear no longer sat in the driver's seat. I did. It's strange when people talk about courage. They imagine grand speeches or heroic gestures, but sometimes, courage is a whisper in the dark telling you to move. Sometimes, it's a pair of trembling hands reaching for the light switch. That night didn't give me superpowers. It gave me something better, proof that I could survive when it mattered most. And once you felt that, you carry it into every corner of your life. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for what you believe in, even when it hurt, share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective, your victories, and even the lessons you've learned from the tough moments. And if you're new here, Consider subscribing for more real-life stories that explore the messy, raw, and transformative sides of being human. Your story matters, and you never know who it might inspire.